In this video, I hope to clarify some fundamental misconceptions about hypergamy everyone seems to have, and provide a better model for romantic interaction with justification. As a disclaimer, I'll be focusing on dynamics between people who are heterosexual. I'm also not an economist or someone who specialized in sociosexual dynamics, but even with my limited understanding of math and these topics, I believe I can provide a better way to think about hypergamy than what's popularly accepted. So what is hypergamy? Today it captures the idea of individuals pursuing and forming relationships with people considered to have higher relative value. How value is defined varies depending on the context. For example, in a dating app for hookups versus someone just arbitrarily making judgments versus in a social circle for marriage. But more or less, the primary factors considered are genetics, social relationships, familial relationships, finances, skills, and personality with varying weights placed on each. At this point in time, it should be pretty clear from dating statistics and just basic reasoning about human nature that hypergamy exists. For example, here's a recent study showing even in Norway, with reduced gender differences in earning capacity, hypergamy is still significantly impactful and can arise due to biological reasons. It wouldn't surprise me if results from less racially and culturally homogeneous countries like the US are even more exaggerated based on commonly observed dating preference trends on these dimensions. Simply acknowledging that men are more sexually aggressive than women means women are in relatively higher demand on average. In combination with what's socially accepted for pursuing relationships, I'd argue women today have more power when it comes to partner selection. It would only make sense for women to utilize this advantage, especially considering the regular support from society to do so. Even many Disney movies encourage hypergamy. If we remove modern devices like dating apps, I believe hypergamy still arises. Take the popularly accepted notion that picking up people in the service industry is difficult. From occasional participation and talking with friends in the industry, when I take a more cynical approach to the topic, I find it tough to satisfyingly justify the noticeable barrier, if it's real, with just trying to do my job. Instead, especially if you're not physically unattractive, I think an opportunity over abundance effect similar to what females experience on Tinder may dramatically increase selectivity, leading to hypergamous behavior. If you've worked in the service industry before the popularization of the internet, say as waiting staff in bartending or in retail stores, and were not prohibited from socializing off work with customers, do you feel the volume of people you regularly encountered had affected your judgment of attractiveness? Please tell me about your experiences in the comments. I'm curious to hear what people have to say. Perhaps due to the public-facing nature of these occupations, people who are admitted into the service industry are on average more attractive and thus difficult to successfully flirt with. Or the baseline is picking up people in situations where they're receptive to advances, like at a party. The whole idea may be mistaken or self-fulfilling in the first place. Anyways, I hope even if you're blue-pilled, you won't deny that when given multiple options, people will generally pursue what they consider best. If you have the time and resources and feedback strongly guaranteeing an acceptable bottom line, why wouldn't you roll the dice multiple times to aim higher, especially if you don't care about or are unaware of the negative consequences? On the other hand, if you're red or black-pilled, I hope you won't view this video with potentially hypocritical bias. The reason I'm sticking to sex-neutral terms when making general statements is because hypergamy, and more generally opportunism, exists in basically everyone, even animals, due to its evolutionary efficacy. If heterosexual dating dynamics were reversed, we'd almost certainly observe a similar power imbalance with the sexes reversed. And, though it's difficult to extrapolate due to differences in social dynamics, history seems to support this hypothesis. With that established, let's discuss how many people in the red and black pill communities currently view hypergamy. The core concept behind their ideas seems to be that relationships for men basically adhere to a Pareto distribution, that 80% of women pursue 20% of the most desirable men. First off, let's ask what is a Pareto distribution and why it could possibly appear here. For this explanation, let's quantify being pursued as number of dates. We might start out with the assumption that the distribution of male attractiveness is exponential. In other words, the probability a guy's attractiveness is greater than x is e to the negative delta x, where delta controls how quickly the distribution falls off. There's a number of ways you could interpret delta with respect to attractiveness, so I'll leave that up to you. Next, we might believe dating varies exponentially with attractiveness at rate mu. In other words, the dates a guy has is e to the mu times their attractiveness. Inverting the function to solve for attractiveness, we have attractiveness equals the log of dates divided by mu. So the probability a guy has at least y dates equals the probability their attractiveness is at least natural log of y divided by mu. Since we assume the distribution for attractiveness, we can substitute to get e to the negative delta times natural log of y divided by mu, which simplifies to y to the negative delta divided by mu, which is a Pareto distribution and with specific values for delta and mu gives us the 80-20 law. Since this distribution seems to fit empirical data from dating sites well, the two assumptions we made may not be too outlandish given our interpretation of being pursued. The problems arise when people try to make deductions off the 80-20 law without properly understanding what it means or where it comes from. I hope Red Pill believers and Jordan Peterson can place more care in presentation when utilizing ideas with sticking potential like these. For example, we haven't considered how age affects things. Red Pill believers often think men should pursue women lower in age, leveraging their experience and wealth against younger competitors by signaling lower variance in quality of life for potential relationships. But what happens if the 80-20 law arises in a way where 80% of the most desirable women pursue 20% of the most desirable men, but also usually within their own age groups? In this case, an older male might be competing for the 20% least desirable women of a younger group, and I get the feeling many Red Pill evangelists don't address possibilities like this when citing the 80-20 law. Honestly, I'm not even sure there's substantial evidence suggesting my random counterexample doesn't generally happen for girls between 18 and 30. Another common issue can be seen in the limiting case. It's easy to encounter deduction that ignores people's callousness towards tail differences on dimensions unrelated to physical attractiveness like intelligence and wealth. Ignoring outliers, I doubt most people will prioritize aspects of intelligence over even shallower traits like personality when choosing between potential partners with 160 IQ versus 170 IQ, lumping both of them into the category of smart. It's this oversight that I'm going to try and fix with today's commonly accepted model of romantic interaction. To better handle the hypergamy limiting case without increasing complexity, at least compared to math with the Pareto distribution, let's look at interactions between men and women abstractly. We can assign both parties a verification and signaling function. The signaling function takes in a person's state and outputs some sensory information, and the verification function takes in sensory signals and outputs a score, say normalized between 1 and 10, and a score threshold which determines when someone is considered attractive. Analogous to the stock market, both the signaling and verification functions can fluctuate over time, even within the same night or regarding the same person. For example, makeup may enhance the reception of certain signals, how a person prioritizes features may change as they mature, and a person's verification threshold might drop as desperation increases or rise when they're more hopeful. Our definition of hypergamy isn't lost. It can be stated simply as tendency to have verification thresholds higher than the score received when verified. Limiting cases can be reasoned about by sampling people's verification functions. We don't contradict existing results like those involving the 80-20 law, and even micro-interactions from POA can be sensibly modeled and analyzed. Let's take a closer look at some examples to better understand how our model works. First on the list is wide availability of affordable cosmetics. As I mentioned earlier, makeup can change a person's signaling function. It's something that's immediately manipulatable and thus blue-pilled in nature. Makeup skill, however, is something that develops over time and red-pilled in nature. A natural question to ask is, does developing the skill have any effects on romantic interaction? I think it's sensible to believe an important factor to being good at doing makeup is understanding what looks good. If this is the case, we might deduce people who learn to use cosmetics develop more acute sensitivity to appearance, causing their verification functions to output lower scores. In this case, even if their threshold doesn't change and they don't feel they're being more picky, they may find increased difficulty finding a satisfying partner, resulting in hypergamous behavior. Social anxiety may also result due to recognizing a discrepancy between the standards of their verification function and how they perceive their own signaling function. I'm not trying to push for the eradication of cosmetics, but we can see here how the model could help explain more subtle effects and suggest where to target efforts at improving mental health. Second is verification at the upper tail of attraction. Our model would predict that due to scarcity, the most attractive people are likely to have more forgiving thresholds than people less attractive than them relative to what they signal. I'm uncertain on this prediction, so I'll defer again to the comments. Please let me know your experience if you've been told you're dating down on multiple occasions. Third, let's look at POA. Our model shows how some advice can be interpreted in a useful way. Since verification functions can fluctuate over time, you want to approach a potential partner when what you signal exceeds their verification threshold. Perhaps POA can help with picking up on the right timing or influencing someone's verifier. For example, people may increase their presence on dating platforms and go out more often when more hopeful to find someone they would score highly. While more available, their threshold can also be higher, increasing approach difficulty. If you're average looking, you may want to wait for less optimistic verification when people retreat to social circle dating where PUA may have a greater effect. If you succeed at getting a potential partner to commit, prospect theory, or the tendency for people to believe what they have is more valuable than equally valued items they don't have, will help you in comparison to otherwise equally scored competition. On the other hand, people generally want to appear self-consistent, so if you approach too early, say at a club, and get rejected when their threshold is too strict, you may lose your chance the whole night. While I say all this, you should probably also be careful of PUA claims overextending in generality. People are usually around average when it comes to most things in life. Within a small circle, you might be able to confidence and behavior your way into relationships, but as you expand your circle of consideration, you will encounter increasingly many competitors that apply your same PUA techniques, and potential partners will have seen all your tricks before. I'm inclined to believe by pigeonhole, even the aspects of what you signal from personality and imagination will almost entirely overlap in verification, since people seem generally much better at verifying subtleties in physical appearance than anything else. Try swiping through your own gender on a dating website. If you ignore the faces, you'll likely encounter a number of profiles just like yours. In this case, it's only sensible a potential partner will pick the best looking person with all your desirable traits or more. In essence, many PUA programs want to suggest that the experience of pickup will signal sufficient utility so that verifiers will sacrifice alternate options, which our model shows is not very sensible if you also believe in hypergamy. Finally, I want to address some obvious problems with what I've presented. While I discuss prospect theory helping both parties post-commitment, I'm not entirely clear how things function after a relationship is formed. People can still divorce, break up, or cheat, and this model was conceived for pre-relationship romantic interaction without really considering these things. I'm also not certain squishing sensory information into a single verification score makes the most sense. I'm certain people have a more complex decision-making process than simply comparing two numbers. However, my anticipation is models that accommodate these two issues will be unnecessarily complex for our discussion goals. Perhaps it would make sense in a research setting, so I'll leave that to whoever's interested enough. To wrap things up, hypergamy exists, and it's a natural expression of the human opportunism everyone has. Wherever you fall on the philosophical hyperplane, I hope I've convinced you to take greater care when making deductions from buzzword concepts and to consider the model for romantic interaction I've presented in this video. Thanks for listening, and see you in the next one.